Welcome to the blockchain. Things are about to change. Open up the gates. Systems get replaced. Bitcoin, decentralize the trust. Security, transparency. The network's run by us. Bitcoin is the
Hello and welcome to the BnkToTheFuture.com podcast. This is your host, Zach Doty. We have Simon Dixon here today. Simon, welcome back to the show. This is the second time we've had you on.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me again. And we've had a few updates since our last podcast, so we're quite excited to do a new one today.
And so this is a unique episode. We're going to talk today about peer-to-peer lending and Credible Friends, which is actually a company that I'm the founder of. And we've been on Simon's platform, Bank to the Future. So we had Simon on to talk about his platform recently. It's an equity private placement platform that has done some $60 million in the last year and private placement capital. And so we're here again because after that last podcast, we connected Credible Friends, which is a peer-to-peer lending app that I'm working on, decided to launch a private placement on Bank to the Future. So we're in the last few days of that seed round, which is open to qualifying investors on BnkToTheFuture.com. And we have exciting news today, and that is that the app is going live in private alpha. So people can actually start to use the app, at least in the web version today, and that the Android version should be coming out later today, going live on the Android store, and then soon the iOS version will be approved by Apple, hopefully. They've got to approve that. So we are going live. It's exciting, and I thought I'd have Simon back on the podcast to talk about peer-to-peer lending. He's an expert in the topic, written a book on it, and we just hit our minimum funding goal, $100,000. And Simon, tell us about peer-to-peer lending and what you think the future holds for that and why you're excited about Credible Friends.
Yeah, sure. So I should also make a disclosure just so everyone knows the situation. You're obviously the founder of Credible Friends, and we've also made an investment through our fund, Bitcoin Capital. So as long as viewers know that, then everyone should know what the discussion's about. So yeah, I mean, peer-to-peer lending. So it was actually created in the UK originally, and a few companies were looking at what the next generation of banking would look like. And I remember some people that I know, a gentleman called Mike Harris, who was behind the first telephone bank, First Direct, and the first online bank, which was Egg in the UK. And he was looking at the next gen, and he was also the team that created First Direct and created Egg, split off in the UK and created a company called Zopa. And Zopa was a team of people that secured some VC funding to think about what would the eBay of banking look like. How could you make loans in an auction style and do some disruption in the bank lending market? And it was originally for personal loans, so people that want to get a loan in order to redecorate their house or have a wedding, are very common uses of loans. And the interest rate could be auctioned, and people could contribute, and they could receive the interest rates that banks normally receive. The interesting part about the peer-to-peer lending model that differs with banking is that there's a couple of things, and that's why I originally got interested in this from writing the book Bank to the Future, is completely different to the banking model, and that is that when an institution has a banking license, they gain the ability to create a loan without actually having a deposit first. So, many people think that banking works where someone deposits some money and then the bank lends it out, but actually the loan is lent out and created onto a bank's balance sheet, and then a deposit exists once they transfer the loan to the customer. So it's the opposite way of most people think. And the problem with that is you end up, creating new money for that. So peer-to-peer lending came along and said, well, the deposit has to exist and investors can invest money into the loan. And then for assuming the risk of the loan, they'll actually receive the interest. And a new model was born, which actually produced better interest rates for both borrowers and lenders, and cut out a lot of the systemic risk that were involved in banking. But the problem is that, that was way back, I think, in 2005. I think we're about 11 years into that experiment now. The industry boomed. Billions have been lent via peer-to-peer lending platform. There's now hundreds of platforms with a few dominant players. It expanded outside of the UK. It started extending to business loans, and it started extending to mortgage loans, and then property investment loans. And now you've got every single financial product looking at how they can incorporate a peer-to-peer lending. What happened as it got more popular is institutions started stepping in and deploying some of their capital by investing through peer-to-peer lending platforms. And so really we started to get large-scale institutional money lending to people via a platform, which kind of really broke down one of the core rules of the peer-to-peer lending model, which is that one of the observations, sorry I'm jumping around a little bit, but I think it's quite interesting, is during the financial crisis, in countries like the UK, which I've studied extensively, the financial crisis, they had about a 7 to 12% default rate during the financial crisis on bank debt. At the same time, peer-to-peer lending in the UK had about a 1% default rate. And the reason for that is because people were, in times of crisis when they were losing their jobs and they could no longer repay their loans, were actually saying, look, I'm more than happy to default on my Barclays loan, or I'm more than happy to, well, I'm not happy about it, but, I'm going to be defaulting on my Barclays loan because I don't really care about the bank and I don't have a relationship that's too important to me about the bank. But I don't want to default on my Zopa loan because I feel that there's an online reputation and I've built a relationship on the forums with some of the lenders and it just doesn't feel right. So it became the last loan that they default on for this reason. And that was because a relationship was in there. But over time in peer-to-peer lending, the relationship has been replaced with large-scale institutional players and even banks lending through peer-to-peer lending platforms. And that's kind of evolved. And then China started to launch the peer-to-peer lending model a lot later. And they launched a model where they didn't have access to sophisticated credit data. They didn't really know the credit risk of these people that were borrowing it. And in China, there's a lot of money to deploy into new quick return investment products because unlike the UK and the US, where most investment happens through institutions, in China, most of that investment actually happens through retail investors because they've got a lot of saving culture and they invest heavily and they're looking for fast returns. Because of that, there was a lot of scandals in China where some of these peer-to-peer lendings were even Ponzi schemes at some point, where billions was being lent and there was no loan. And also the credit data wasn't there and the relationship was completely broken down. So we saw it work in the UK very well in the beginning where it decreased the default rates. And then it turned into more of an institutional business where the government even started lending in order to stimulate business. And then the products that they offered into real estate started turning into asset-backed peer-to-peer loans. And then in China, it exploded and failed in a very large way. And they're kind of going through that right now on what regulations will come from that. And then kind of the final part, bringing it up to date, is that we've had some, scandals with the American US peer-to-peer lending platforms recently, which we might want to discuss later if it's relevant and ties into this. And also we had the birth of a new currency, which is Bitcoin. And the new currency, Bitcoin, had the first generation of peer-to-peer lending platforms. And, we made an investment into Credible Friends because we think that Zach and the team are doing things in a different way and in a new way. And so I think that's a brief history of peer-to-peer lending and where we're at. The potential of peer-to-peer lending is not in question. What is in question is the model that's going to work sustainably and actually start to scale and disrupt some of the behavior of how humans borrow and lend, and whether institutions are going to end up doing that and we recreate a new version of banking through a peer-to-peer lending platform. So the jury's out on all those, and that's kind of where we are right now.
Well, thanks for the introduction to peer-to-peer lending. You're an expert in this, having written a book which I recommend, Bank to the Future, and it's on Amazon. And you write in your book about how peer-to-peer lending is going to evolve into something that happens through social networks. And I think that to a large extent, some of the online peer-to-peer lending platforms, they're kind of missing the boat because when I think of peer-to-peer lending, in the human form of peer-to-peer lending is just you ask somebody you know and trust to borrow some money, or they offer to extend you some credit. And peer-to-peer lending happens every day for most of us. In our everyday lives, somebody says, "Can I borrow $10 for this?" And we just extend credit freely between the people that we trust. It's completely different from this online loan to a stranger based on their credit score, which you probably don't even know how that was calculated. You don't know if they're way over leveraged on their house. You don't know about all of these other things because you don't know the person. It's a stranger to stranger loan. And so it's no surprise to me that the default rates are so high.
It's also worth mentioning is that's not really, it was an improvement on banking in peer-to-peer, but really it's not a peer-to-peer because you're not sending money from one individual to another. You're sending money from one individual to a platform and a platform to another individual.
Exactly. So let me briefly describe Credible Friends for those who haven't heard. I guess this is kind of the big announcement today with the launch for those who didn't see our website previously, and kind of for those who aren't investors on the platform. So Credible Friends is an app that allows you to deposit some Bitcoins into a multi-signature wallet. Multi-signature meaning we don't control those funds. You're not sending us your Bitcoins. We have one of the three keys, so we can approve transactions, but we can't make transactions. We can't take your money and run with it, which, like you said, happened in China with some of the biggest peer-to-peer lending companies over there, which were Ponzi's, and we want to shield ourselves from that whole thing by keeping the user in control of the money. So it's a truly peer-to-peer loan. And so in this multi-signature wallet, one of the keys is synced to anyone you extend credit to, and so they're able to spend money on demand, which is another point of distinction from other peer-to-peer lending platforms such as Lending Club or Prosper, which are term loans. This is a line of credit, so it gives you more flexibility. You can extend the same dollar multiple times to multiple people.
So in that sense, is it kind of like a credit card? So you don't, you have your credit card in your wallet, but you decide whether you want, and they say, well, you can spend up to $2,000. And then you decide at point of sale whether you want to use that credit or not.
Exactly. Just like with the credit card, if you have a $10,000 credit limit, you're not paying interest on that $10,000. With Credible Friends, you could have 10 different friends extend you $100 each, and you're not paying interest on anything unless you spend money, and you're spending on demand. You could go out and you could spend $800, for example, to buy something with Bitcoin. That $800 might buy you $1,000 worth of merchandise on Amazon with some of the Amazon discounts that are out there. And you might pay that off in 2 weeks, and you only paid interest on what you used just for the days you used it. We use the average daily balance method for calculating the interest that's due. And again, we're Ubering the banks. Your friends can be the banks. Why pay interest to Goldman Sachs, to Barclays? Why pay interest to the big banks when your friends could capitalize your card and earn that interest, which ties into our big plan here, which is we're going to put a credit card in your pocket that's funded by your friends. So the average American household pays $2,600 a year in credit card interest. Now, think about that. That's an insane amount of credit card interest for the average American household to pay. What if you could, instead of the banks, earn that money from the people that you trust, from your credible friends? Well, now you can. You can earn interest if you replace the banks, and they can get soon a debit card which will function as a credit card. It's going to be called the Credible Card, and that gives them access to tap into credit that you've extended to them. We're also going to be expanding soon with partnerships that will allow us to offer USD-based wallets. But for right now, Bitcoin is really the key that makes this all work, because Bitcoin gives us this frictionless, programmable, borderless currency that just works out of the box. And the most beautiful thing here is that it keeps the users in control of their money, and it's global. So with this, we're a global lending platform. One of the lenders on one of the investors on Bank to the Future asked a question. Steve from Bank to the Future asks, "Are China and India game?" Yes, Steve. Our app's already translated into Mandarin, Spanish, and Hindi, but more importantly than that, Bitcoin works everywhere. So this is going to be a global lending platform, as compared to Lending Club, for example, which only is available in 46 states.
Well, and I think this brings an important point, because I think some of the investors on the platform forum might have been asking, why would you need Bitcoin to do this? And actually, you've already pointed on it, but Bitcoin, in terms of, from a regulatory standpoint, by using Bitcoin, you get a significant improvement because you eliminate the counterparty risk. in that you don't need to touch the funds. You don't need to trust the platform about whether the loans are actually being issued or not. And other than using a cryptocurrency, because it's programmable, there's no other way of fully implementing, eliminating some of these counterparty risks. As the normal model would be you'd use an escrow agent, and then an escrow agent would be another counterparty, and you need to trust that counterparty to transfer funds, and then you have arbitration processes and all those things. But what's eliminated here is that you don't actually assume any counterparty risks. You're truly lending peer-to-peer, and Bitcoin is the enabler because it's the only secure blockchain or currency where you can do that. And then there's also the benefit that it's on a global scale as well. But you're trying to also implement ways in which, so I imagine, my guess is that this will be very attractive to people that have Bitcoins initially in the Bitcoin community. But over time, what are you doing in order to make this accessible beyond the Bitcoin community, given that you have to have Bitcoin in order to eliminate counterparty risk, make it a much stronger proposition for regulatory purposes where you don't have to trust the company in the middle? But how could this be useful for more users in the future?
We have a kind of a three-pronged approach here. I mean, we're launching with Bitcoin because Bitcoin, like I said, it's the best currency in the world. It's programmable. That's why we're all here, because it's programmable, frictionless, borderless. It's an open network for value transfer, and it enables this kind of innovation. It enables people to rethink and reinvent the financial system in the way that it works. And it allows, most importantly, I think, for people to stay in control of their own money. And that's, I think, the point that really stands out here. In fact, I got to give the credit to Roger for challenging me to go back and rebuild this app to use multi-sig so we don't control the keys, because it was a unique challenge because of the architecture of the wallet, because you need to be able to extend credit to more than 20 people, for example. You can only have 16 pub keys on a Bitcoin multi-sig address from the redeem script limit. We need to be able to spend money when lenders are offline. So these unique challenges kind of threw a wrench into the whole plan. We had initially built this to work with cold storage and a company-funded hot wallet. And I was in St. Kitts and Nevis with Roger, and he said, you got to figure out how to do this with multi-sig. And based on his challenge, we ended up figuring out how to do that, which is really cool because it's taken like the stress off. I mean, it would have been so stressful
Roger Ver, for those who may not know him, the investor in many of the first Bitcoin angel investor, and also the founder of BnkToTheFuture.com. Is that right?
Yeah, owner of BnkToTheFuture.com. And so those who are listening to the BnkToTheFuture.com podcast, Roger, thank you so much for that advice. Very happy to be able to launch this in a way that is much less stressful for myself, not having to be responsible for the money of all these users, because you're going to write down your own seed. If you download our wallet, you're going to be writing down your own seed, your own private keys, and keeping those safe. And you're going to put money into your wallet, and you're going to be able to extend money or extend credit to the people that you know and trust already. And do that with a few clicks. It's a very simple process because you're loaning to a trusted person. Unlike Lending Club, where it takes 7 days because you're loaning to a stranger, with Credible Friends, it takes 2 minutes. You tap the app and you've extended credit, and you just became a credit card company. And the banks, they don't have any say in the matter. We're Ubering the credit card industry. We're letting anybody play credit card company, and it's just exciting, and it's actually really cool because I just started using the app today because we just turned it on to LiveNet. We've been in testnet doing tests for a long time. We just went live today with the LiveNet, and I started extending real credit to my friends, and it was really cool. So
the people listening to this can now download the app. Is it which app stores is it available in?
So for right now, go to crediblefriends.com, and you will be able to sign up, deposit some Bitcoins, keep your wallet seed in a safe place. For those who don't have experience backing up private keys, it's super easy to forget about a wallet backup, and you don't want to do that. That's your backup. If you lose that, you might lose your money. So keep your wallet seed in a safe place and deposit some Bitcoins. Add a friend just by typing in their name and their email address, and then set a credit limit for them. And they can borrow up to that limit, whatever's in your wallet. And if multiple people extend them credit and they try to spend Bitcoins, it's going to pull all of those unspent transaction outputs, all the UTXOs from all those different wallets. It's going to build one Bitcoin transaction. It's going to be seamless to the user, and it's going to enable them access to the aggregate amount of credit that's available to them.
So am I right in saying that this version of the app would be very much focused on people that have Bitcoins and are familiar with Bitcoins, and this will be the geekiest and hardest to use version of, as in the very first version of the app, and then over time you're looking at iterating it and making it more and more user friendly, and then gradually creeping out beyond the Bitcoin community? Is that the goal?
Yeah. A real goal here, if you want to get into what drives me, I am passionate about Bitcoin, and I want to see everybody have access to Bitcoin. And so I'll tell you how I came up with this idea. I used to be one of those people who went around giving everybody a few dollars of Bitcoin so they could try it out. It's like, here, download the app. You have to try out the future of finance, the future of money. This currency is so cool. It's the coolest thing since sliced bread. Download this app. I'll give you $3 of Bitcoin. And they're like, what can I do with $3 of Bitcoin? Not much. And so I thought, well, what if there was a way for me to just extend credit to them just by entering their name and email address? And then I was hands off. They had a reasonable amount of money that they could go shop on Amazon. They could experience Bitcoin. They didn't have to go through AML KYC because this is just a peer-to-peer extension of credit. This isn't some financial service platform. Again, this is going down peer-to-peer. There's a lot of benefits, and that's one of them. And so I thought, wow, what if we could give people an app that lets them share the Bitcoin experience with all their friends? And so that's the original vision here is I want an app that makes it so you can tap a button to import all of your contacts, and then you can just go through the list and drag the slider or set a limit for each person. Say this person can borrow up to $10, this person up to $200. And you just became a credit card company for 100 of your friends. You select your risk tolerance on a per individual basis based on how much you know and trust and believe that that person will pay you back. This is a much more professional way to lend.
So, Zach, I'm just looking at the Bank to the Future pitch at the moment. So you've hit the minimum funding goal of $100,000. Bitcoin Capital, which is a fund that Max Kaiser and myself run, have made an investment in, included in that $100,000. You've got 3 days left, and a lot of the investors on the platform have brought up some really interesting and challenging questions. So maybe we should go through some of those questions and get your response.
Sounds good. Let's go through those questions.
Okay, so I think you picked out some of the interesting ones. Have you got those there?
Yeah, so Spencer from Bank to the Future, one of the investors there, Spencer says, how do you collect on a friend that doesn't pay? And that's where this is different from handing your friend a $20 bill and saying, hey, pay me back when you think about it. So this brings some professionalism into friend-to-friend lending. It's not as awkward, and you don't have to say, hey, you owe me from last month. Remember that? No, I don't remember it. So we keep track, our app keeps track of everything. So when you extend credit, when they borrow money, if they don't pay you back on time, there are consequences, and there will be alerts that are sent out by our system. They just have to pay back a minimum payment every month. So very much like a credit card, they don't have to pay the whole thing back every month. They just pay a minimum payment. But if they do default and don't make their minimum payment on time, then there's a late fee. And yes, there is recourse. You can get a proof of the default from our system. You can download some proof of that default and hand that to a collector, or to, you can take civil action. If you've extended somebody $5,000 and they didn't pay you back, you might want to take civil action. And those options will be available to you through this platform, and you'll have the documentation you need. The Future asks, can it be used for lending to farmers in Africa? The answer is absolutely. It's global, and it's borderless money. And we want to see what are the use cases that people find for credible friends. And it might not always be to loaning to your friends, right? Maybe we'll change the name if this turns out to be something that people use for something we haven't even imagined. Maybe people will start their own little mini credit card companies, and they'll start doing credit checks on people, and they'll use this app to facilitate the whole process. We don't really know how the app's going to be used, but right now, it's the simplest way to extend credit to anybody that you trust already. So if you trust that farmer in Africa, by all means, add his email address in there, set a credit limit for him, and that's it. You're done.
I'm trying to think of some of the applications where we do make such loans how about the student loan market? I should imagine that quite a lot of people, they either borrow in some countries, they borrow off the government or get some kind of grant, or their parents pay, but maybe there's a large portion of the population that actually lend the money to their children, or an auntie, someone related might lend some money for a student loan. Can Can you think of any other applications where this might actually be used?
Student loans, if you wanted to loan money to a nephew for going to college, definitely. I'm going to try to bring this to everyday spending as well. And so I think the big elephant in the room is the credit card industry as a whole, which means plastic in your pocket and soon NFC at point of sale, and that's gaining traction. And we're looking at both of those. We're working with Shift Payments to be able to do a debit card that will be kind of crowdfunded by your friends. So it'll be this peer-to-peer credit card that you'll be able to use at the gas station to buy your gas. I mean, Lending Club and Prosper and these other peer-to-peer lending companies, they're targeted at the big term loans. They don't work for everyday spending. So what if we can build a Bitcoin peer-to-peer lending platform that works for everyday spending through something like the Shift card? That's what we're building.
Yeah, so maybe in the future, it may be that one of the, you extend credit, someone records a video from their phone of what they want to do with the money, then that push notifications out to all the people that are extending credit, and then they can decide. I don't know, it could go several ways, but I think the point here is that you've got the application that's truly peer-to-peer. There is a peer-to-peer market. I think this is the first application that's looking to do something without counterparty risk for the credit card market, and using Bitcoin as the enabler. And you're not 100% sure exactly. The first iteration you thought would be extending credit to your friends, but you're open to really adapting what this technology can be used for as the market tells you.
Yeah, I think a trust-based peer-to-peer lending is the key concept here, and whether that trust is a coworker or somebody that you know or trust for other reasons professionally, we want to see how people use this app. I mean, there could be B2B applications for this, but the important thing is we built the platform, and now anybody can use it. And it's as simple as depositing some Bitcoins and entering in the email address of the person that you want to extend credit to, and entering in a credit limit for them, and the app handles the rest. We sync an encrypted private key to them. You do have to share with them an activation code, which decrypts that private key on their device, and then that multi-sig transaction can be initiated by the borrower, and we just sign that or approve that transaction with the one key that we hold on our servers. And so, if you look at the other peer-to-peer lending platforms like Lending Club, they're not peer-to-peer in the sense that the money doesn't just go directly person to person. Like you said earlier, the money goes through their platform, and it's a completely different model. So Lending Club and Prosper, those are borrower-initiated lending processes. Borrowers go to their site and apply for loans, and they have this big pool of investors that sift through the applications and approve them. That method suffers from a coincidence of wants issue. We're flipping it around. We're saying, hey, take $1, extend $1 50 times over. First come, first served basis. You could put one Bitcoin into Credible Friends, and you could extend $650 worth of credit to 10, 15 people that you trust. And so you're getting maximum exposure for your capital within your circle of trust. And I think the important thing here is that this happens at the speed of trust. Everything high trust is fast, everything low trust is slow. We're building an app for that high trust environment. Peer-to-peer lending doesn't happen on a stranger-to-stranger basis anywhere except the internet, right? If I walked into a coffee shop and saw a stranger and said, hey, I need $15,000 for refinancing my car loan, my student debt, they would be completely confused. But if I told my dad that I needed $15,000 for refinancing something, he'd totally understand. And so there's this natural human peer-to-peer lending behavior that we're mimicking by allowing people to loan at the speed of trust, which is how loans happen in real life.
Okay, Zach. Well, I think we've covered quite a lot of points. The pitch is up to 100 grand, so congratulations, you've reached your minimum funding goal. That means that this round is going ahead no matter where we go for here. But we find that most investing happens in the final few days. So we're going to be opening up to a maximum of $250,000 to the qualifying investors on BnkToTheFuture.com. And we look forward to seeing where you take that next. There's some more interesting questions that have come through on the forum, so it'd be good to see what happens next.
Thanks again for coming on the podcast, Simon. Again, thanks for being a part of our raise through Bitcoin Capital. And we're just really excited to bring people an app that allows them to share the Bitcoin experience with all their friends. So for those who are listening, if you have some Bitcoin and you want to make that, let's say you have $20 of Bitcoin, you want to make Bitcoin available to all of your friends, it doesn't take more than a few minutes to start extending that credit to the people you trust. And we can all think of 10 or 20 people that we would trust. And now we can really spread Bitcoin. There's no PR team for Bitcoin. We are the marketing. So if we're going to get Bitcoin into every pocket, if we're going to get Bitcoin into mainstream, then we need to be able to give everybody the chance to try and experience the future of money. And I think that's the vision. That's the vision behind this app, and we want to give Bitcoin evangelists everywhere a tool for them to no longer be walking around trying to give people $1 of Bitcoin to try it out, but instead you can extend people a meaningful amount of credit in the currency of the future. And so that's what I'm really excited to be able to do. And again, thanks so much, Simon, for coming on the BnkToTheFuture.com podcast. For those who are listening, you can go to bitcoin.com/podcasts to listen to more episodes. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Blockchain. Things are about to change.